The man in the shop slowly opens his eyes. Nick wakes up to find a strange man in front of him. It's all brick and mortar, with the number 48 floors etched into the walls. Only in the center is a square hole with no bottom. This is the famous prisoner's pit, where prisoners are held for crimes. Nick, who hadn't committed any offense, came here of his own free will. He came here voluntarily because he was given a certificate for 6 months. This certificate seemed to be worth a lot of money. Nick had no idea what he was in for, because before he could figure out what was going on here, the wall turned green, only to see a hovering platform slowly descending from the hole above. There were all kinds of leftovers on the platform. Hungry Danny grabbed the food and began to devour it. As Nick saw this, he couldn't understand why Danny would want to eat someone else's leftover food. Next, Nick will realize that in this place, food is the key to survival. Before the platform descended, Nick picked a whole fruit and put it in his pocket. Soon he realized he had made a fatal mistake when the place instantly starts to heat up. A puzzled Nick learns from Danny that this was because he had taken the food from the platform, and only the food on the platform belonged to them. What they left behind broke the rules and the temperature would rise indefinitely. Danny advised Nick to throw away the food if he wanted to stay alive. Nick threw away the fruit in his hand. At this moment, he felt something was wrong, because before entering this place, the customer service agent repeatedly warned him that he would only be released after time had passed, and the customer service staff told him that he could choose one thing to bring in. Nick was afraid of being bored and only brought a book. Danny has been locked up for months because of an accident that killed another man. Danny tells Nick that the prison works in a very simple and brutal way. It's all about food and survival. Each floor of the prison holds 2 people. The food is gradually lowered from the bottom to the bottom. On the top floor, you can't eat every day, even trample on the food. But when you get to the bottom, you don't know at which level the food is gone, because no one cares about the people at the bottom. What's worse is that the prison floors are moved to another place every month. If you come to a higher number, it means you're in more danger. At first, Nick didn't understand the meaning of the phrase, but to adapt to life here, Nick had to eat the same food as Danny. But soon, something strange happened. A man upstairs fell to his death. Stunned, Nick didn't know what had happened. Then a woman came from the upper floors and sat her on a food platform, but Danny seemed to be used to it. He ignored the woman and took a big bite of the food. Nick looked puzzled and tried to ask the woman what was going on, but the woman didn't pay any attention to Nick. Danny explained that the woman was looking for her girl, so every time she came up, she came down. Nick couldn't believe a girl was being held here. The woman had just reached the 49th floor when Nick saw her being dragged away by 2 men from below, because in prison, the only thing that matters is survival, and people will do whatever it takes to get there. Nick is up there trying to stop it, but there's nothing he can do. Danny advised Nick not to worry too much because the woman was ruthless. Just as the 2 men on the lower level screamed, the woman sent them to hell. Seeing this scene, Nick realized the cruelty of the law of survival, and he seems to start accepting things like this with open arms. Survival is all that matters now. Nick and Danny lived in peace. I don't know how long it took, until one night, anesthetic gas began to fill the air, which meant that their 1 month was up. The gears of fate began to turn. When Nick woke up again, he found himself tied up by Danny. Danny came at Nick with the knife he brought with him. Horrifyingly, they made it to the 171st floor. When the food was delivered from the platform, there was nothing left at all. Tied to the bed, Nick realized the consequences, as Danny had long ago used him as food, but there was nothing he could do now. Despite his pleas, but Danny had lost his humanity and both men were in agony. As time passes, the hungry Danny finally relents and prepares to kill Nick. Nick saw that he was about to be brutally murdered, and to his surprise, the woman who had been looking for the boy came to the platform, and Nick asked her for help. Perhaps because Nick had tried to save the woman, she chose to help Nick this time. The woman knocked Danny to the ground and handed Nick the knife. Nick took the knife and decided to send Danny to his grave for the rest of his life. Nick lived on Danny's body. With the next round of transitions, when Nick wakes up again, he finds a dog beside him. In front of him was a woman who looked very familiar. It was the customer service agent who had entertained him. Luckily, he was back on the 33rd floor. That meant he had enough food supplies to be safe for the next month. But Nick couldn't understand why Laura was here. Laura told Nick she was here of her own free will. She was dying of cancer, but after years of painful treatment, she wasn't getting any better. She came here to complete her final journey. Laura doesn't know what's going on here. All she knows is that the prison has 200 floors. She told Nick that there's enough food to keep everyone alive. As long as everyone distributes the food wisely and doesn't waste it, then there's enough for everyone on every floor. But only if they stick together. But there's no point in doing that. It's a fool's errand. Nick laughed at her for bringing in a dog that would be food for everyone else. But Laura took the opportunity to make the dishes. If the people at the bottom can't follow this dish and pass it on like she did, then the people at the bottom will survive. But no one paid any attention to Laura, because they had experienced the despair of not having food. It had long worn off in their minds. that being able to eat was all that mattered. Over the next few days, Laura continued to deliver this message, but no one paid any attention to her. Nick came across the woman searching for her children again. This time collapsed on the food table. To save the woman, Nick took her into his care, but in the middle of the night, an argument broke out. It turned out that the woman was so hungry that she had taken Laura's dog as food. Nick had become numb to this kind of thing and told Laura to let it go. The next day, the woman returned to the food platform, ready to leave to find her baby. But Laura tells Nick that she's just a crazy woman with delusions of grandeur. Laura now realizes that there is no way to convince anyone here. She gives up eating because she knows her days are numbered. Once the prison floor changed, her life was over until Nick woke up one day and found himself on level 202. Horrifyingly, Laura had chosen herself, and Nick was stunned by the sight, though he'd been through far harsher things. Laura's death still broke Nick's heart, because what followed was even more brutal. It chose Laura as food in order to survive. Between his inner resistance and his instinctive fight for survival, Nick finally chose to survive. This time, he woke up to find himself on the 6th floor. Blake's presence makes Nick realize he has a new cellmate, but Blake was obviously prepared, because he had a rope with him. He tries to use the rope to climb to the top floor, with the intention of escaping. The problem is that someone has to help him, but no one would do such a thing that wouldn't benefit them in any way. After much begging from Black, the man above agreed to give him a hand. Black hurriedly threw the rope up, but when he climbed up with all his strength, when he reached the top and signaled for the other to pull him up, he realized that the other was just toying with him. The other man suddenly let go of the pull, and Blake slipped right off and fell onto the opening in the edge. Luckily, Nick put him back and saved his own life. It was only now that Blake felt the darkness of the place. Nick also realized that he couldn't go on like this any longer. He thought of what Laura said to him. Maybe the only way to keep everyone alive is to distribute the food wisely. He told Blake about the plan, and Blake thought it was a workable plan. Rather than stand by and do nothing, they should take the initiative. The two men immediately dismantled the iron frame and used it as a weapon. Because here, only the powerful are qualified to speak. The two stood on the platform with their weapons to guard the food, but coming to the next level, Nick realized that there wasn't enough food for them to reach the bottom today, because they don't know how many floors there are. Nick realized that the people on the top 50 floors could go a day without eating, because they'd already eaten yesterday. But there's a lot of resistance to this feeding program on the first 50 floors. Some of the people who wanted to get food resisted, but the two of them made it through, until Blake met another black man on one of the floors. Blake recognized him instantly. He was once a respected celebrity, but never expected to end up here. When he learned of the two men's plan, he questioned, even if the two of them died trying to get the food to the bottom of the building, it would only last a short time. The authority won't change the way things are run here. Maybe if a message is sent to the base above, if they had a clear conscience, they might be able to change this place through outside pressure. It was their only hope, and he made his suggestion.
Por un símbolo, necesitamos un plato delicioso e impecablemente presentado que regrese intacto al nivel cero.
To chose a cake as the target of their plan, but the further down they went, the more resistance they encountered. Due to hunger, most of them lost their minds, and the two men subdued them one by one with sticks. In the afternoon, they began to distribute food to the others, but Nick still saw a tragic scene when he realized that the woman looking for her children had been killed. Nick and Blake rushed up and fought to the death with the two men on this floor, eventually sending them to hell. But it was too late. The woman had already been killed. Nick was taken back to the food platform by Blake and continued on to the bottom floor. After a struggle, the two were seriously injured. The lower they went, the fewer people were left alive. On the 333rd floor, Nick found the woman's child. They thought they had reached the bottom, but as soon as they climbed down, the platform dropped again. The bottom is the lowest level. Nick tells Blake to throw the food down, because now he realizes that if the food stays here, they'll be exposed to the heat. But it's the only complete hint of information, and Blake doesn't want to give it up so easily. After a long time, Nick didn't notice that the place was getting hot, so it didn't seem like the rules were triggered here. The girl crawled out and looked at the cake, but faced with the only hint of information, they gave the cake to the girl to eat. Nick knew the girl could be the new source of information, because the prison had civilized rules about not imprisoning girls. As soon as the girl is set up and discovered by the base, then someone would surely investigate the authority and change the place. The two can only wait here until the food platform comes down the next day. But when Nick woke up that night, he found that Blackie had died from blood loss. It could only take the girl to the platform the next day. They descended from the 333rd floor to the bottom. Nick left the girl on the platform. He himself went to the endless darkness of the abyss. The film ends on a hopeful note, as the girl quickly rises to the top on the platform.